Hope everybody had a great evening last night. Some good meals, good conversation, good fellowship. Well, here we are. After 6 years of not convening our lay leadership and our professionals together, we've now entered day 3, our final day together. Yet, it's also a new beginning. Thank you for being here. By choosing to be with us, each of you as leaders have made an investment in the future of your Jewish community and the JCC movement. Our intention during this time has been to sharpen and advance our individual skill sets, which in turn will strengthen, enhance, and transform our outcomes. Your takeaways help grow your JCC or your camp and improve your local Jewish community. Strong local communities create a more united North American Jewry. And with our friends from JCC Global present, together we synergize relationships across continents to build upon common ground. Our impact starts locally, but emanates to far greater reach when we stand together and recognize that this thing of ours, we know as the JCC movement, is a powerful platform, greater and with more potential together than the sum of its parts. As leadership vested in building our platform, your voices and expertise are vital, and your input this week has and will continue to provide invaluable learning for us. As ambassadors to and from your local communities, your perspectives and insights uniquely represent the needs of your community. We hope that you will be returning home with new relationships and a deeper understanding and appreciation of the needs, challenges, and opportunities of all our communities. Collectively, we strengthen our JCC brand equity to lead and connect the JCC movement. I'd like to take a moment this morning to acknowledge several special guests who have joined us today. Please join me in welcoming the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest, Yinam Cohen. Deputy Consul General Delphine Gomberg. And the Consulate's Director of Public Diplomacy, Rini Schreiber. Thank you for being with us and for your support of our important work, both local and continentally. Now, within my morning remarks, let me wax and wane, or wax poetically, or wax on, wax off, to weave around our JSummit themes: the power of our movement, the power of partnership, the power of leadership, and today's session, the power of peoplehood. You know, I often get asked, how did you get here? So I'm a JCC brat from San Diego. And you know, the JCC has always held that special passion for me and created so many positive memories throughout my life. Early days at preschool, summers at day camp, tween and teen experiences, and long-time participation in those JCC basketball leagues. Then came the rest, like arts and culture, JCC Maccabi, seniors, budgets, Jewish film festivals and book fairs, leadership and capital campaigns. What I love best about JCC is that we offer so many touch points along the spectrum of life and the on-ramp of choice. And these touch points leads to connections and relationships that transform lives. As JCC leaders, we never know whose lives we are influencing. And it's our responsibility to identify that next generation of leaders and to tap them on the shoulder to join our work. You know, these stories are the very fabric of our movement because there's nothing more powerful. People become ambassadors, They bring in new members, program participants, volunteers, sponsorships, underwriting, and community connections. You know, for me, that story came from a long time ago, and it came from the world of basketball and through volunteer coach Max Shapiro, who at that time was a former scout for the old San Diego, now Houston Rockets, NBA basketball team. I was an overweight teenager playing at the old 54th Street JCC, and I played on a traveling team because I wasn't good enough for my own high school, which won the city championship that year and sent all 5 starters to college scholarships. But I played on our JCC traveling squad. We competed against boys clubs, other YMCAs, rec centers, and other regional JCC teams. And this was way before JCC Maccabi was created. Anyway, back to Max. Max was our coach, and he was disciplined in John Wooden principles. So what a mentor. And he helped me to grow as a player, to get my butt in shape, but also provided that inspiration and positive impact upon me that not only could I be a great teammate, but I could be better individually as a person. Stupid as it is, that was my hook. And very briefly, you know, I'm sharing that. But yet we all know of others. Those stories of friendship bonds between families that were established in our preschools, the day and overnight camp connections, or that emotional touch that comes from one of our films or our authors, or that interaction that comes from one of our staff members. When it happens, watch out, because it creates this special bond between individuals, families, and the JCC. Little did I know back then on the basketball court with Max Shapiro that that tap on the shoulder would lead me to become the chair of our movements board, that I would call myself a product of the JCC movement, and that would become my #1 give back organization in my volunteer work and my philanthropy. I started locally at the remarkable Lawrence Family JCC on the Jacobs Family campus in San Diego, which is currently run by Betsy Lynch, a powerhouse executive who has also served as a member of our JCC Association of North America board and is an important voice within our movement. In 2004, I joined the JCC Association board, and I gazed upon our continental movement with its vibrant colors and the global networking opportunities, and I formed a new understanding of our work and how we serve the field. It was interesting to contrast my roles from a different vantage point, with different lenses, wearing different hats, that of the local JCC where I came from, other JCCs across the platform and the North American landscape, and that of the JCC Association. Over the years, I've seen firsthand and have appreciated the values JCCs bring to their membership and their respective communities. You know, but my professional background and the variety of roles I've had have somewhat paralleled those within my JCC world. You know, I came from a sales organization, you know, sold toilet paper and cleaning supplies and romance toilet bowl cleaner. But, you know, we built a very successful business over a 75-year career for the family. It's not me, it's 75 years of the family. But the idea of moving things forward is you need to connect with people, share a vision, the goals, and accountability for products, programs, and success. You know, we develop our people to be successful, yet at times we have to make course correction or make changes or choices for change. And, you know, over the years, I've witnessed my good, bad, and ugly in leadership and with people. But one thing I've learned is that if you are in relationship with individuals, you can move mountains and accomplish many things, but you can also have those difficult conversations. But if you have it, you can be so constructive. You build mutual respect, you move forward with the idea of personal growth development and outcomes. So we speak of JCCs as the town square, a haven for the social, physical, cultural, and educational experiences of coming together and providing a welcoming space for creative evolution, connection, collaboration, and growth. We celebrate family, foster health and wellness, embrace traditions, create friendships, and expand cultural horizons, building stronger Jewish community and more vibrant Jewish life. You know, you've heard throughout these last couple of days some of our numbers. You know, I'll share them again. If we repeat them 21 times, they become habit, you know? But we're the largest, most diverse platform for engagement of local Jewish communities on this continent. No other Jewish organization rivals our size, scope, and reach. You know, across our 172 JCCs and overnight camps, we reach, you've heard this number, 1.5 million people, 1 million of them Jewish, 500,000 non-Jewish, our allies who choose to come to JCCs. 100,000 campers and staff at our day camps and overnight camps, the largest network of any platform. 35,000 children in our early childhood programs. But the one other interesting number is we employ almost 50,000 full and part-time and seasonal staff. We are the Jewish community's largest employer by far. And we also have about 3,000 lay leaders on our local boards. It's an amazing set of numbers that are there. And we are this dynamic, ever-evolving network, as we all know and learn and continue to learn and grow. But it's of note, you know, it's been 6 years. And since we last gathered at our movement, 2018, approximately 1/3 of our execs in the field have started in their roles. That's quite the transition, new opportunity. And we have even a higher percentage of board chairs and volunteers who've come into leadership since then. And as you all know, JCC Association of North America is experiencing a transition in our leadership. We are thankful for Doron Krakau's leadership during his 7-year tenure, and now under the helm of our immediate past chair and my fellow San Diegan, Gary Jacobs, we have begun our search process to identify our next CEO. We have engaged with our search committee the nationally recognized Heidrich and Struggles within our process, and we've established a timeline for our decision, hopefully by the end of the year. You guys have all made and shared the love throughout this week to Jennifer Mamlet, our acting CEO, for leading the organization during this interim period, and our entire leadership staff, leadership team, and our staff for their continued efforts. I think we can give them another round of applause for this. The mission, the vision, the values, and our business continues. You know, we appreciate our team. We're working hard to move our efforts forward. Now, in a short while, I'm going to be teeing up Zack Bodner to lead us in on our theme of the power of peoplehood, C3, and building an important narrative on JCC's relationship with Israel and our oneness as a global people, and how the JCC movement is the essential driver for our local communities and as a North American collective. And after that, we'll go into some workshops for an hour or so, and then we'll be excited to come back, and we'll be honored to have Naftali Bennett, former Prime Minister of Israel, address us. But for me, the power of peoplehood is at the heart of who we are. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to spotlight a couple of our peoplehood efforts within the movement. The first one, very familiar to all of us. That's the JCC Maccabi Games and Access. You know, from my initial exposure to it some 20 years ago, the JCC Maccabi experience, as I like to call it, because it is an experience, has held a special place in my heart. I'm sure you've all felt that too, if you have been exposed to witnessing the opening ceremonies and seeing the parade of flags from so many Jewish communities around the world. Here, one gains a special and true sense of peoplehood and the realization that you are part of something bigger. The goal of the JCC Maccabi Games is to contribute to the maintenance and enrichment of Jewish identity in youth and the development of leadership through healthy competition and sportsmanship. Since its inception, going back to 1982, the games have touched more than 500,000 lives, and it's probably even more than that when you consider not only the athletes, but the communities and the volunteers and the fans and the families who come to visit, the participation, the sponsors. But learning the values of teamwork, integrity, cultural pride, connection to Israel, community service, and lifelong friendship are all very positive attributes of our efforts. 3 years ago, we added access as an opportunity for JCCs to engage teens with disabilities and their families in the magic of JCC Maccabi. Access provides a life-changing global Jewish peoplehood experience that strengthens their Jewish identity and introduces these teens to peers around the world. And as you know, we announced that Access is now a permanent fixture within the JCC Maccabi experience, so we're very happy for that. It gets hot under those lights. In cooperation with Maccabi World Union, Maccabi Canada, and Maccabi USA, we create a global experience that provides a springboard for local JCCs to create year-round engagement. I'd like to take a moment to recognize Deb Lichtenfeld, the head of development for Maccabi World Union, who has been with us in proud partnership throughout the conference. Deb? But together, we make sure that beyond the games, JCC Maccabi is a springboard for cultivating those lay leadership relationships, supporting fundraising, building awareness of JCC programs and services, expanding membership, and positioning your local JCC as a leading agency in the community. As we know, after a pause during the pandemic, JCC Maccabi returned in 2022. Hey, shout out to San Diego. And has continued to grow under the leadership of Senior Vice President Sam Cohen, the wonderful Sam Cohen. Sam has led in close partnership with a strong lay committee, which is now chaired moving forward by Jeremy Samuels from Houston. And until recently, the one and only Lisa Brill from Atlanta, who could not be with us due to illness. So we appreciate those efforts. But I'm proud to say that today, JCC Maccabi, we have a strong pipeline of future hosts, increasing philanthropic investment, and a strong strategic vision to continue what is one of the strongest Jewish peoplehood initiatives of our time. And now I'd like to touch on another program at the heart of our peoplehood initiatives, and that is JWB, the Jewish Chaplains Council. For some in this room, I'll bet this will be the first time you may be hearing about JWB. For others, it has been the beneficiary of your dedicated and meaningful support, and we thank you for that. And still, for others, JWB has been a source of confusion, with even some questioning why it lives within the JCC movement. Well, if you don't know, the JCC Association was founded in 1917. So we're 107 years old as an organization. But our roots, we were founded as the Jewish Welfare Board, which was set up and established and founded to support Jews in the United States military who are going off to war. Many decades later, we were rebranded as the Jewish Community Centers Association of North America. And JWB is not only the forerunner to JCC Association, but they are also a founding member of the USO and the driving force behind the creation in 1946 of the World Federation of YMHAs, which is now proudly JCC Global. JWB is also the only all-embracing agency that cares for the welfare work of military personnel regardless of denomination, and the only organization that endorses chaplains from all streams of Judaism. Today, JWB is led by Rabbi Larry Bazer, who is here with us today, and alongside JWB Committee Chair Extraordinaire Ruth Fletcher from Silicon Valley. They are leading to ensure our movement through the Jewish Chaplains Council maintains the distinction of serving the roughly 10,000 Jewish men and women and thousands of veterans who serve in our U.S. Armed Forces and their 5,000 plus family members and dependents. JWB endorses Jewish chaplains to the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs, training, supporting, and augmenting their resources and advocating on matters of policy. Imagine you are a young Jewish soldier or sailor and deployed for months at a time. What would it mean to you if you had an organization like JWB caring for your spiritual needs? What would it mean to you to have a Jewish chaplain deployed with you to lead holiday and Shabbat services, or heaven forbid, a Kaddish minyan when needed? Like JCC's, JWB serves all Jews and even non-Jews, and that is why it is not only a historical imperative that JWB remain part of our movement, but it is also a moral imperative. Jews in the U.S. military are from our Jewish communities, and it is our obligation to serve them and to support their families back at home. This obligation cannot be defined only by geography. I'm very proud that through programs like JWB Passport and Operation Summer Camp, we are meeting this call, and I thank those JCCs and overnight camps who have embraced this effort with us. The power of JCCs, the power of JWB, the power of peoplehood. Partnership, leadership, peoplehood, more than the themes of this conference, they reflect the essential ingredients of movement building. And that leads me to my final few words about our Stakeholder Partnership Initiative, the ultimate effort to recognize we are stronger together and that we all have a stake in the outcome of our work. Now, my board is aware that I have these obscure musical references that I sometimes make into my messaging, so here comes another. My intro today was a piece of music to about a 15-minute song called East Coast Racer by a band that none of you have probably heard of called Big Big Train. The song shares a story from July 3rd, 1938. A streamlined locomotive called Mallard set the world speed record, which still stands today for steam trains, traveling at 126 miles per hour on a straight downhill stretch of the East Coast mainland in Great Britain. For most people, the story would be about the record-breaking speed. For the band Big Big Train, the story in East Coast Racer is about the hardworking people that poured themselves into the project several years before to make it possible. The designer, the assistant, the fireman, the driver, the community of engineers and railwaymen who all played a part in the making of a legend. The song reminds me that something extraordinary happens when people come together in common cause and purpose and pour their hearts, hopes, dreams, passions into achieving something once thought impossible. And now I work us back into our stakeholder partnership model. We have our own cast of characters. In our committee chair, the wonderful Sandy Carden. Consultants, Brian Hayden, along with Jeff and Carol Cohen. Our JCC professionals, Jen Mamlett, and our CFO, Michael Feinstein. And that community of engineers and railway people that come through. Our committee, our execs in the field, our additional external partners, and now all of you are a part of that. It has been, and it continues to be, a very thoughtful and meaningful discovery process to create a roadmap, to provide us with direction in that intersection that you've heard between the building of the systems for keeping JCCs and the association aligned here in North America, the JCC Association value proposition, and a new revenue model. Again, I will state, something extraordinary happens when people pour their hopes, hearts, dreams, and passions into something. Our stakeholders believe in a centralized organization for our movement. Putting it into a win-win-win outcome is a work in progress. As you know, we've been utilizing this convening opportunity as another feedback loop for thought and input from both our lay leadership and our professionals within the movement. We intend for 100% engagement of voices and ultimately 100% shared participation within the JCC movement. If you've not already provided your voice or sought out additional input or attended, I encourage you to join one of the final breakout sessions that will immediately follow today's session for us. JCC Association of North America, we work in concert with and on behalf of JCCs to move our field forward. Throughout our time together, we've spoken about partnerships, people, programs, and promotion and what we do. Those unifying themes throughout the conference: power of our movement, power of partnership, the power of leadership, the power of peoplehood. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot of peeing. So let me add one more, and that's the power of us. Let us seize the opportunity to elevate and to amplify our JCC movement in North America and achieve the picture of success we all desire. So now let us be embraced by the breathtaking lyrical finish of East Coast Racer as we embrace our role in creating the future of our movement. It won't be the song, it'll be my words. From this far away now, she flies with them into sky, into history, into legend. She flies. Thank you. Thank you very much. For my next song, I have the honor of introducing one of our movement's great leaders. Zack Bodner has served on the JCC Association Board of Directors. He founded the Z3 Project and is the current president and CEO of the Oshman family JCC in Palo Alto, California. More than any of those titles, Zack is also a great friend and an inspiring leader. Please join me in welcoming Zack Bodner.
Good morning. Welcome to day 3. How's the summit been for you? The JSummit, excuse me. How's the JSummit been? Yeah, good? Good. You feeling good about these last couple days? Feeling good about what we've learned? Feeling good about our friendships that we've made? Feeling good about this movement, this moment? Yeah? Look, we've had 3 incredible days. The first day we're talking about the power of partnership. Yesterday was all about the power of leadership. And today, the power of peoplehood. But it begs the question, what is peoplehood? What is Jewish peoplehood? Well, I'm going to answer a question with a question, because that's the Jewish way, right? What is Jewish? What is this thing we call Jewish? Is it a religion? Is it a nationality? An ethnicity? Is it a moral code? Is it a culture? Is it all of the above? Because we know we can be an atheist, or we can pray 3 times a day, and we're still Jewish. We can keep kosher, keep Shabbos, or eat the bacon double cheeseburger, and we're still Jewish, right? Our families could have come from Eastern Europe and spoken Yiddish, or from Saloniki and spoken Ladino, still Jewish. Because at the end of the day, it's all of the above. It's all of these things. You mishmash it all together. That's why we call it a people. That's what this beautiful thing of peoplehood is. And that's why this movement is ideal to propagate the most important thing that we do, which is this Jewish peoplehood thing. Because we know at JCCs and JCC-affiliated camps that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter where you were born, where your family came from, which foods are Jewish in your world. It doesn't even matter if you're Jewish at the end of the day, right? Because we understand whether you're J-curious, J-adjacent, call it what you want. You're part of our mishpacha. You're part of our family. You're part of the peoplehood. Let me tell you a story to illustrate exactly what I mean, and it will resonate with just about every one of you in this room. A couple years ago, there was a woman on our board of directors who was Japanese, is Japanese. She liked to call herself the Japanese shiksa. That's what she called herself. She never converted to Judaism. She considered herself part of the people. Her husband was the Jewish one, two Jewish parents, but he didn't care. It wasn't his thing. She was the one who made Shabbat dinners. She was the one who made these great Passover meals with these Japanese undertones. She was the one who schlepped the kids to Hebrew school. She was the one who was supposed to chair our trip to Israel in the summer of 2020, which of course was canceled because of COVID. She just had a couple years ago, she had her first kid's bar mitzvah at the JCC. Next month, she has her next kid's bar mitzvah at the JCC. She rolled off our board a couple years ago. She went on to another board in the community, the board of the Jewish Day School. Her kids don't go to school there. But she's a part of our mishpacha. She's a part of our family. That's what this is all about. And that's what JCCs and JCC-affiliated camps can do. We bring the folks together. But now here's our challenge. We're divided as a people. We're a little divided. We've always been. Look, this isn't anything to Shrai Gevalt about. Nothing to get really upset about. We've always, since, Jacob and Esau didn't get along so well. Joseph and his brothers, it goes back, right? The Sadducees and the Pharisees, not such good buddies. Hillel and Shammai couldn't even agree on how to light Hanukkah candles. Come on, right? I can keep going. In our darkest hour during the Shoah, you had Jews who thought the best way to save lives was by fighting as partisans in the forests. And you had Jews who thought the best way to save lives was serving on the councils. Didn't get along so well. Didn't like each other. Even in the founding of the Jewish state, the Irgun and the Haganah, the two underground armies were shooting at each other. We've never gotten along, people. Not a reason to freak out. But we do have to figure out how to create unity, not uniformity. Unity, not uniformity. And it can't only come from our moments of trauma. Okay, there was a moment, a split second after October 7th, when we did come together. And Mijal Bitton, who you will hear from momentarily, wrote an incredible piece in Sapir called "That Pain That You're Feeling, That's Peoplehood." We put all our differences aside for a second. It didn't matter if you're Orthodox or secular. It didn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, left or right. It didn't matter if you're a Trump lover or Trump hater, Bibi lover or Bibi hater, bacon lover or bacon hater. Nobody really hates bacon, right? They just choose not to eat it. I'm just saying. For a moment, all these differences were set aside, and we came together. But that's already in the rearview mirror. There's already the fraying is starting to, it's already happening, right? I'm not saying anything that's a surprise to you. What we've noticed in our community, and I think it exists elsewhere in North America, if not the world, as I look at my friend Smadar, who represents JCC Global, is there are 5 trends that are taking place right now in the Jewish world. The first trend has been well documented. A lot of it, it's called the surge, right? People have come out of the woodwork. The Sheryl Sandberg effect, the holy shit, anti-Semitism isn't in our back. We have to deal with this. And I want to help, and I want to do something. It's the surge. It's those folks who are saying, Hineni, Hinenu, Jen. And we have to capitalize on that. But we have to recognize there's also another trend, which is the folks in our community who are like, can't we just go back to normal, whatever that is, if we can? It's the folks in our community, and this is real, who want to send their kids to JCC schools or JCC camps and say, does it always have to be all about Israel and the hostages and the war? And this is real. Don't judge these folks in our community who feel this. Can it just go back to being about Jewish food and Jewish music, David, and Jewish movies and Jewish holidays? Does it all have to be about Israel all the time? And they're embarrassed to say it out loud because there's a shame affiliated with that, because it bumps into the third trend, which are the Israelis. And those of us who have Israeli family, Israeli friends, the Israelis, not just in Israel, but the Israelis here, the Israelis in the diaspora, for whom every single day is still October 7th. They have not moved on, and they can't. There's no PTSD. It's still trauma. They all know somebody who was killed, who was taken, who was murdered, who tortured, or have a child who's serving in the IDF, or they know somebody up north. By the way, 80,000 people no longer living in their homes up north. That's not talked about. They all have somebody for whom this is very personal. So for the Israelis, it's real. The fourth trend is what I'm calling the shtetelizing, especially of the North American Jewish community. Right? Jews from other countries, we have friends here from Mexico, friends here from Serbia, they'll understand this because in foreign countries, the Jews haven't had their sixth sense bred out of them. They know when there's danger on the horizon. For American Jews who are second, third generation, we've had it bred out of us. But now we've been woken up. And so the shtetelizing that's happening is because members of our community are no longer trusting their non-Jewish friends. They can't understand how they're not getting the sympathy. They're betrayed by their friends who they thought were allies who are walking away. They're buying guns. They're enrolling their kids in Krav Maga classes. And I'm not just talking about Jews in Texas. These are Jews in liberal Northern California buying guns. I'm telling you. The shtetlizing is real. And then the fifth trend is to move to the far left, the progressive move. And I'm not talking about the anti-Zionist Jews. We could talk about that. Haviv and Mijal will get into it. I'm talking about the Jews on the left who care about Israel, who know that Israel was wronged on October 7th, but maybe they're like, I don't know if the way that this war is being fought by the IDF is right. I'm not so sure about Bibi. There's a lot of deaths in Gaza. I'm feeling a lot of pressure from my friendship groups. I don't know how to hold both these things in my hand at the same time. There's that element, that trend in our community. All five of these trends, they're about to smash in together in the one-year anniversary in a real way. They're about to smash into each other. And that's why what we do is so vital. You just heard David talk about JCCs as the town squares. We are the town squares. We have to find a way to bring everybody together. Unity, not uniformity. That's the first principle of the Z3 project. Let me tell you what that means, what that is, and why so many members of our movement, folks in this room, are being a part of that. We started this 10 years ago as Zionism 3.0, Z3 for short. Zionism 3.0 because we're in the third era of Zionism. Zionism 1.0 was pre-48, Herzl Zionism. If you will it, it is no dream. We need our own state. It came about, 1948. That was the beginning of Zionism 2.0, the upbuilding of the state. If you don't have the chutzpah to leave the diaspora and come, you better support us unequivocally. You better send your checks. It was the diaspora of the rich American uncle. It was the diaspora of, you have a stake but no say. It was the diaspora, it was the Zionism, the Zionism of diaspora negation, right? It was almost like a little judgy towards those who stayed there. But guess what? I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, something shifted. And we're now on the cusp of this new where there's two centers of Jewish life, two strong centers of Jewish life, with all due respect to my friends from around the world, North America and Israel. Two strong centers of Jewish life making incredible contributions to the future of Jewry, and we have to stop just wagging our fingers at each other. We have to stop talking past each other. For too long, North American Jewry has been saying, Israel, you better get it right with Palestinians. You're not offering us non-Orthodox Jews the respect. What are you doing with your Israeli? There's been a lot of judgy. And meanwhile, Israelis are looking at us going, you're not even going to be Jewish in a generation. Assimilation, intermarriage, anti-Semitism, right? We've been talking past each other. So this notion of, let's create a third era of Zionism, a recognition that both of these centers of Jewish life have so much to contribute. How do we do this in a constructive way? That's what the Z3 project is all about. And it's based on these three principles. One, as I said, unity, not uniformity. Don't need to agree, never going to agree. Number two, engaging as equal partners, bringing Israelis and diaspora Jews together to have this conversation. No more talking at each other, but talking with each other. And third, a diversity of voices. We have to be comfortable having a lot of people in the room with whom we disagree. That's why when Amitai, our Z3 director who's here in this room, and I were working with Lisi and Mark Young and the folks to put together the JSummit, we insisted on having on this panel today a diversity of voices. So you have a woman, you have a man, you have an Israeli, you have an American, you have a Sephardi, an Ashkenazi. We packaged a lot in these two. They're incredible. You're going to hear a lot of difference and a lot of similarity. But we have to have a diversity of voices around the table. And that's hard. But I'll end with one last story before I introduce our panelists to give you a sense of how we can make it work. We've made it work. We've struggled. We haven't always gotten it right. But this last summer, as we were preparing for summer camp, I knew we were headed for a potential problem unless we dealt with the Israel issue beforehand. We had over a dozen shlichim, Israelis who were coming to serve on our camps, many of whom had just gotten out of Gaza, serving in the IDF. We had a Nova survivor coming on our staff. And I had a bunch of pink and purple-haired college students who were just coming off college campuses, who, if they themselves weren't challenged with the Israel question, they had friends who were in the encampments. I said, how are we going to deal with this? They're going to be living together for the summer. I said, let's sit down, let's have this conversation. So we spent hours, and we sat down with them, and I started like this. I said, here's the deal. I am under no obligation to protect free speech here. Okay? This is not a public space, not a public university. We will not protect hate speech. Sorry. There's no anti-LGBTQ speech. There's no anti-black speech, no anti-immigrant speech, no anti-woman, anti-Muslim, no anti-Jewish speech here. And anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So that's where we start. There's the boundaries. Now let's have at it. As Rachel Fish says, let's create brave spaces where we disagree and we duke it out. But hate will not be permitted. Now, that still leaves a lot of questions, and that's why we're going to have two incredible, brilliant minds help us think through some of these questions today. Because just like these folks might be working at your camps, working at your JCCs, living in your community, children or grandchildren in your families, sitting around your Shabbos tables, we have to ask these questions like, at what point are they no longer invited to be a part of that? Are there red lines? Are there tent poles after which people just kind of put themselves out of the tent? What does that look like today? And how can we redefine this notion in this moment? So, I'm now going to introduce our two panelists. I'm going to take a breath and let you just digest all that. Lot to talk about, lot to do. So thank you for putting up with that. Now, let's talk about these two incredible individuals who we're going to bring up on the stage. Mijal, you're first. All right, Mijal Bitton. She's the, I don't know how many of you, did you see her give that like impromptu speech at this rally on the streets of New York? How many of you saw this? I don't have in your title here, Mijal, that you're a certified badass, but I think you should add that to your... Yeah, add it, okay. In addition to that, she's a public intellectual, she's a spiritual leader, she's a scholar in residence at the Maimonides Fund, and she's the Rosh Kehillah of the downtown Minyan in New York City. She's a visiting researcher at NYU's Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. She's also an alum of the Wexner Graduate Fellowship, a new pluralist field builder, and a Zack scholar. She co-hosts the podcast Wandering Jews, or Wondering Jews. I like the pun, there you go. Wondering Jews, and was a featured speaker at the historic March for Israel in Washington last November. Please help us welcome Mijal Bitton. Come on up. And our next speaker, Haviv Rettig, who, if any of you have been on a trip to Israel sometime in the last couple years, you've probably had him speak to your group. If you've ever been on one of these podcasts or calls from Times of Israel or anyone else, you've also heard Haviv. If you haven't heard him personally, everyone else is quoting him, or they're taking his good material and they're trying to say it's theirs. But it was really his, I'm telling you. Haviv is an Israeli journalist who serves as the senior analyst at the Times of Israel. He covers Israeli politics, foreign and regional policies, as well as its relationship with the Jewish diaspora. He has reported from over 20 countries on the issues of the day. He's fluent in Hebrew and English. He served as director of communications for the Jewish Agency for Israel. He teaches about the intersection of journalism, history, and politics at very prestigious Israeli pre-military academies. We could tell you what they are, but then we'd have to kill you, so we can't. And we're going to start with a question for each of you. What does peoplehood mean to you? How do you define peoplehood? How do you define Zionism at the end of the day? Mijal, we'll start with you.
Oh, so really easy, right? Defining peoplehood and Zionism. Thank you so much for having me here. And I was so enjoying your words and really listening to your description of Jewish peoplehood. I would say for me, Jewish peoplehood, I could give it like theoretical descriptions, but a lot of it is experiential. It's the fact that most of us in this room have a sign saying that our heart is in Gaza. It's the fact that we might meet somebody Jewish in the airport and strike up a conversation. I'll add maybe a definition or a theory about how to think about the practice of peoplehood. I was 21 years old when I staffed a birthright trip. And I gotta tell you, I was very nervous because I was taking it like super seriously. They were there just to have fun. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like shape everyone's lives. And I went to a mentor of mine, Shuki Taylor, and he said, Mijal, let's think about what you're gonna be doing as a metaphor. And he said, what are you going to be doing? And I came up with the following metaphor. I said, what if the practice of this birthright trip, and I'm adding here the practice of peoplehood, is that we have this album with pictures. We used to have those, remember? We don't have them anymore. Okay, they're on our phone. But we have this album with pictures. And it's pictures of the Jewish people across time and across space, from hundreds of years ago, from different places. And the practice of Jewish peoplehood is to say, I want to put my picture here. And my picture belongs in the same photo album as other people, and I'm going to have different levels of responsibility and solidarity to all of them there. So to me, that is the crux of Jewish peoplehood, and we can talk about the edges and the boundaries. Zionism, I mean, Haviv is like the expert of talking about what Zionism means and shouldn't mean, and yes, no, okay? Sure. Maybe I'll say very quickly, because we started talking about the surge and trends, I'll say the following. I think very often people, if you look at the polls, a lot of people support Israel. They want to be in relationship with Israel and Israelis. less people describe themselves as Zionists. Okay? There is a gap there between the ideological label and between the work of actually being in a relationship with Israel. My working definition right now that I think most people have is that Zionism is that if I could go back, right, to 1948, I would want the state of Israel to be established. I wouldn't want to go back and rewrite history. So that's a working definition that I actually share with a lot of young people, and way more people identify as Zionists when we put it like that.
Haviv.
I just realized now that you could choose your walk-on music.
Yeah, right.
So I feel a little cheated.
I didn't choose mine either, Haviv. We're in the company. So.
Yeah. Look, when things get complicated, one of the really reliable methodologies, practices in life is to fall back on fundamental things. So when we are not sure about taking a big step in life, having kids, proposing marriage, retiring, big steps in life that affect who we think we are and how we understand our lives. A lot of times the best advice that people give and people get is just the very simple notion that you actually know exactly what you want to do. And you're layering on top of that knowledge all kinds of anxieties and fears and concerns. And what is that thing you actually want to do, right? So if you have 3 seconds to tell me, are you going to do it, right? Immediately, and you don't have time to think, then whatever you say, that's probably what you should do. And it's not what you should do because you shouldn't prepare for the fallout of your decisions and you shouldn't know that this is going to have a cost, but because that's who you are. We don't necessarily choose who we are. There are 2 ways to have a relationship to a people. You can have what is essentially a marriage, and you can have the relationship you have with your parents. Anybody here have a relationship with their parents? Yeah. The thing about relationships with parents is that you don't choose them. They can be the most important and wonderful and strong and building relationships in your life. They are also the source of all your troubles in life, and you should blame your parents for them. But the most important thing about your relationship with your parents is you didn't pick them. And that doesn't mean they're not the most fundamental thing in your life. Marriage is deep. Marriage is big. Marriage is dramatic. Marriage is the building of a family. Marriage is a choice. And marriage can be a bad choice, and marriage can be fixed in the sense of if it's a bad marriage, it can be ended. So I submit to you that my definition of peoplehood, and there might be and there might not be, and there might be for some and there might not be for others, but my definition is the fundamental thing you fall back on, the 3-second thing. Jews are dying. Are you there with them, or are you not there with them? I don't mean emotionally in any single second, but just in terms of your fundamental commitment of who you are. If you know this about yourself, that's what it is. Are you the child of this people, or are you married to this people? And one of the interesting things is when you get into the halachic discourse around conversion, one of the things Maimonides tells us is the convert is not married in that sense. The convert is the child. The convert is, how do we call a convert up to the Torah? Son of, or daughter of Abraham and Sarah. And so I submit to you, we are the children of this thing, and that is peoplehood, and therefore we will defend and protect each other, even when you're totally wrong about everything we argue about, right?
Haviv, I love that you went there to make this about family and the family connection, the family relationship. There's the Talmudic story about how a woman tried to convert back into Judaism after she converted out, and the rabbi said, you never even converted out. You can't even convert out of Judaism, you can convert in. So to your point, but my worry is for those who do see it as a marriage, who would say, is it time to get divorced? Are we so different? Do I have nothing in common with the Haredim and Bnei Barak if I'm a secular living in Brooklyn? Like, are we able to allow people to make their own definition and therefore divorce themselves from our people?
Me. I would. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't think that's an important question. The question is very important. I don't think it's an important thing we have to decide. In other words, I've met a few anti-Zionist Jews over the last 11 months because for my sins I have been sent to some college campuses. And every time I meet them, I say the same thing. First of all, I try and skewer them. I try and shish kebab them with, what the heck's an anti-Zionist Jew? I mean, the last living Jew in the Eastern Hemisphere is the Zionist. All the rest are dead. So what's your argument? You're actually just an ignorant Jew. You're not an anti-Zionist Jew. If the Jews could have survived any other way, they would have. They couldn't, so they didn't. If what you're telling me is you wish the world had given the Jews other options other than Zionism, I'm with you. Then I'm an anti-Zionist alongside you. But you don't know enough to make a serious historical argument here. So anti-Zionism is just moral signaling now for your purposes and needs now, which is totally fine. You enjoy it. If it makes you happy, be an anti-Zionist. But the other point, which I take much more seriously, is if you're an anti-Zionist Jew, there's a bracha in your siddur for seeing extraordinarily beautiful things. The Talmud says beautiful camels, beautiful women, and beautiful landscapes. I don't know what the Talmud's so worried about with beauty. I don't know how the Talmud thinks of beauty, but I'm sorry, it's 7 cents. I didn't make it up, guys. I'm making fun of it. The point is that when you see an extraordinarily beautiful thing, you say, Shekach lo be'olamo. Blessed is God, for this sort of thing is in his world. When I see an anti-Zionist Jew, I say, Shekach lo be'olamo, because it is a beautiful thing. Because here's the thing about an anti-Zionist Jew. It is a Jew who feels safe enough to be an anti-Zionist. And that is a beautiful, wonderful, marvelous miracle of the history, and it pretty much only exists in the English-speaking world, in any real sense, as a phenomenon. And if it ever goes bad for them, my job is to be here for them. And I'm going to say I told you so, giving you a heads up. I hope I never do. I suspect I won't. The English-speaking world, I suspect, will actually protect its Jews for generations and generations to come. But so no, a Jew who leaves Peoplehood hasn't left Peoplehood. I'm sorry, I just want one last point, just to take up I apologize. I'm Israeli, so I'm going to still talk, but I'm going to apologize. That's the politeness coming through.
Exactly.
But the Catholic Church once experienced this with Cardinal Listiger of Paris, right? He was a Jewish boy hidden by priests in the Holocaust, saved by priests in the Holocaust. And he was basically a teenager by the end of the war, and he chose to to convert to Catholicism and become a priest. And he spent a lifetime in the church, and he rose to become the Cardinal of Paris. And then he passed away in, I believe, early 2000, late 90s, something like that. And the Catholic Church wanted to have a big burial ceremony for the great Cardinal of Paris. And the Jewish community of Paris came to the church and said, no, 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 he's a Jew. We're burying him as a Jew in the Jewish cemetery. And the Catholics had this horrible problem. I mean, yes, and it's the Jews, and we're super trying to be nice to the Jews, but the man became the Cardinal of Paris. What does a man have to do to convince the Jews he wants to be Catholic? I mean, what? And the Jews are like, yeah, no, he was wrong. I mean, what? Right? And I felt a lot of sympathy for the Catholic Church. So if they leave, they haven't left. If they think they've left and it makes them happy, let them enjoy it. And our task is to be there for them if they need us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is good because this is when we start to maybe disagree a little bit. I'll say a couple of things. I think I am less generously inclined than you are to say, enjoy, I'll be here. I forgot exactly all your words, Haviv. To almost like see them as a little bit silly, but like you'll eventually, I'll be there for you no matter what. I'll give you one of I've also had to be at college campuses for my own sins or mitzvot in this case, or good deeds. But for example, when I spoke with students at Columbia University, with Jewish students, and when I asked them, what's your greatest challenge, okay? And the greatest challenge for them wasn't SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. It was what they described as 30% of the campus that somehow identified in some way or another 30% of the Jewish community on campus that somehow identified as Jewish, that was itself allied with the anti-Zionist forces on campus. So I actually think, we're going to talk about boundaries, about the edges. I think there's plenty of people who are well-meaning and still part of our stories and our communities. And I also think it is time for us to say there are certain boundaries and there are certain actions and words that are not just wrong, they are harmful. They are harming our Jewish people, they are harming our cause, and we have to figure out how to stand up in different ways to that. I'll add one more thing here, Haviv. You brought up two different metaphors that I think are really instructive. Is peoplehood, is a relationship to each other and to Israel akin to children and parents, or is it a marriage? And I'll say something, and again, Zack, you spoke before about trends, right? And I'm gonna, generational trends. People have very different relationships right now as to what it means to be part of a family. I can tell you, for example, and this might be a place in which Israelis and Americans differ from each other. I have heard young people who say, I can walk away from my family. I can choose to walk away from my parents. That is part of the new way of talking about who we are. There are so many people, I'll say it differently, Haviv. I think for better and for worse, descriptively, not what I wish was the case, descriptively, if we look at young Americans and young American Jews, when they think about their relationship with Israel, their relationship with the Jewish community and with each other, for many of them, it is a choice. For many of them, they feel like they have to walk in. So part, to me, of the challenge that we have in front of us is to ask ourselves, how do we create this project in which we take in mind the fact that it's a choice? And then, actually, we might have to figure out what are different choices. And how do we educate towards a choice that is not just, going back to the marriage metaphor, infatuation, right? And if I like you and it feels good and it's romantic, I'm with you. But actually is a commitment. And the first actual, you spoke about conversion before, the first example that the rabbis really look up to as the paradigm for conversion in the Bible is the story of Ruth and Naomi, right? And Ruth, for her, the path to join the Jewish people is absolutely a choice. And it's a story of love. She falls in love with her mother-in-law, and she basically commits herself to her as a choice, but then says, nothing will break up this choice. We're going to somehow have something that is both a choice and that has sustenance and strength inside it. So that, I think, is the challenge that we have to think about how to address right now in our communities.
I love that you went there with Ruth, because that was also very easy in a way. Your people are my people, your God is my God. Zeo, yalla, let's go.
I love it, by the way. I think it's perfect. Yeah.
I know. By the way, JCCs, and again, not just to make this a commercial, but are the best at this, because we're like, yalla, come join us. Mm-hmm. Your people are our people. But it isn't that simple, tachlis, when you get down to having to figure out who's sitting at your Shabbos table, who's in and who's out. And you talked about maybe 30%, young people on campuses are saying 30% of the Jewish community may be pushing these boundaries. Haviv, you may see this a little bit differently from your experiences on campus and your experiences talking with young people. Do you think it's that many? Do you think we need to be worried? Or do you think this is just like a little blip and they're just small numbers making a big, loud...
Wait, can I just correct? In the Columbia campus, that's what the students described. I don't believe right now that the data shows that it's 30% of young American Jews. Not at all. I think we tend to over-index anti-Zionist young Jews, and we tend to give them more of a stage because they are very loud, but they are a small group. They're a small group, and we need to be kind of like careful in the way that we describe them.
Although AJC did just come out with a survey recently where they said that young Jews, upwards of 30+%, maybe even closer to 40, say that they don't believe that Israel has a right to exist, and they still don't think that that's an anti-Semitic thing to say. So these numbers are pretty high. I would say a lot of it comes from ignorance. But I'm wondering, Haviv, if you have a different take on this, if you think that we should be thinking about this a little differently.
I think Mijal made a very good point, because there's a difference between Israelis and Americans on this question, because they don't threaten me, the anti-Zionists. You're an anti-Zionist. Mazel tov. Tomorrow morning, 2.5 million Israeli school children are going to school speaking Hebrew. What the heck is an anti-Zionist? Anybody here anti-Canada? One guy in the back. Truly, enjoy it, right? Have fun with it, be fun, but it doesn't mean anything. Canada's still there, right, tomorrow morning. So I'm not threatened by them, whereas other Jews on campus could very well be threatened by them. And so there is a vulnerability to this. that I think what you said reflects that I don't feel and don't sort of automatically understand and share. So I take your point absolutely. I would say, though, that the posture that says this is the fundamental thing, and it remains the fundamental thing, whether or not there's a new fashion to find in everything radical individualism and the radical reshaping of who we are and what we are, and I get to decide, and the only autonomy is the autonomous self, and that inner world of mine, I can decide what authenticity is. And this is something that comes from radical individualistic American Protestantism for 400 years now. A lot of people were surprised over the last 15 years at the development of the particularly American version of, for example, transgender ideologies and thoughts and ideas and scholarship. And I'm not. I know I mean, I'm not because I'm an ignorant foreigner, but also because I know exactly what that is. You know what that is? That's Protestantism in America, secularized. And how do I know what my gender is? You can only look into my own inner self. My inner world is the source of authenticity and truth, and it's the only source of authenticity and truth. This is how Americans do Christianity. This is how Americans do Catholicism. It's the most Protestant Catholics in the world. It's how Americans do Buddhism. It's how American Jews do Judaism. It's how Americans do every single thing Americans do. Also gender, also family, also everything. On the one hand, I take it very, very seriously. It's deep, it's authentic, it's a central way of thinking in American culture that makes America a very strange country compared to the rest of the world. It's one of your contributions to human feeling and human development. It's a very strange and interesting and fascinating thing. It's probably why you're a democracy, the first modern democracy that then democratized half the world. In other words, again, celebrating it. However, that's not what Jews are. Jews are family. And I don't mean family in the nice, fun sense of getting together for dinner. I mean, when everything collapses, they're the people who pick you up. That's what Jews are, and it's what Jews were before, and it's what Jews are today. And if you are taking this journey through a 4th century Protestant world, do it. Bring to us from that very strange world, this new world in human history, the history of human thought, bring to us innovation and interesting new things and a skepticism about rabbinic authority and all these great things that American Jews have to offer the Jewish world. But you're still family. The Kotzker Rebbe once talked about love. He said people use the word love, and in every European language, they use the same word to mean two opposite things. He said, when I say I love something, am I referring to fish love? What is fish love? Fish love is when you say, I love fish. You know what loving fish means? It means you want to kill the fish and eat the fish. That's what fish love is. What is fish love? Fish love is when you love a thing for what it does for you, even at the cost of its own death. And then he says, what is real love? Real love is not what it does for you, it's what you do for it. And that's fundamental and unbreakable. That's unconditional. And that is what Jews are. And folks, if you forget it, good. That means you're having a healthy, happy time off somewhere. If your kids go off to college and forget you exist, they're having a great college experience. And if something terrible happens, God forbid, and they need you, everything swings back into action. And I submit to you one last point, which is if that's your posture, then your door is open for all kinds of Jews going on all kinds of complicated journeys to always walk in. And if that is not your, which by the way, it is your posture, just FYI, I'm telling you that your own argument about yourselves in an Israeli idiom. And if it's not your posture, then these Jews who are going off to these weird journeys you're not a Jew anymore. Okay, so you're not a Jew. If you ever become a Jew again, come back, right? I think that should be our posture pedagogically, and I think ultimately that's the Jewish message.
Yeah. I want to add something, Haviv. Even as I was arguing before, the language of choice is much more like the natural language in the American Jewish community. I do want to say that part of what has, Zack, you spoke before about the search. Part of what has given me so much strength and so much nourishment in the last 11 months is seeing, I don't know if I want to call it like an awakening of American Jews. I work in Manhattan with Jews mostly in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. That's like the main kind of like demographic that I get to teach and work with on a daily basis. And I know that I'm not the only one that, in my circles that has just seen so many people who might use the language of choice. They might use that Western Protestant American, language around Judaism as identity. But in terms of how they are relating to this moment right now, they're showing up differently. I'll just say this very quickly. In the last 5 days alone, okay? So thank God we have a big space in Manhattan to host people in the community that I lead. I had 70 young Jewish professionals for Kabbalat Shabbat and dinner, 100 who came in the morning for services and for lunch, 115 military cadets. David, you spoke before about Jews in U.S. Army. So Jewish students from military academies across the country who had something called Warrior Weekend, in which they celebrated their Judaism, and they came to us for musical Havdalah. And then just 2 nights ago, 60 faculty and staff members from NYU who are trying to figure out how to respond to this current moment, coming together, all in the same space. Now, some of these are gathering together because of anti-Semitism. Most of them are not. They're gathering together because there has been something that has reminded so many people that you don't need to have uniform, you don't need to be the same, right? You can be different from each other, you can seek different things, but there is so much power in community and in being together. And to me, Haviv, part of this actually, when I think about my fellow educators and sociologists who've been speaking for decades about Jewish identity, I think we have a lot to learn here about what we got wrong. And I think part of what many of us in the field got wrong, so I'm speaking about myself, is to believe that because in America the language of choice and the language of individualism are the main categories that we use, and because so many people seek to have such individual journeys, that I think the mistake was to think that then people wanted that in their Jewish spaces. Some people do, but many just want to be in community with each other. They want to be invited to something that feels traditional, that feels authentic, not necessarily about Israel, but just that they are invited to be with each other. And part of our responsibility, I think, right now, is not just to fight anti-Semitism, although it's important, but to really double down on taking advantage of this moment. JCCs across the country, I was blown away, David, when he said 1.5 million people that come through. I can't even deal with those numbers.
Every week.
Amazing, even more. Like that is, it's amazing, and it's such a big responsibility. I'm like looking at everybody in the room right now, like the responsibility that each of you have and the privilege, like to really like take this and meet this moment is absolutely immense. So there's challenges, but I'm also incredibly optimistic about the future of Jews in America.
All right, so let me push you on this one, Mijal, because you wrote an incredible piece about talking about the pain and the trauma of peoplehood. And I want to understand if you believe that this is sustainable, this surge and these people coming out to just convene and be with each other. Is it going to, in 6 months, in a year, after the war ends, and it will at some point, God willing, is it a sustainable thing? Or is Franklin Foer, who wrote this piece in The Atlantic, saying the golden age of American Jewry is over, is he right? What do you think?
So 2 things. Like Haviv, I love the metaphor of family to think with. And I think family is just really instructive. It's not the same, but it's helpful to think with. So God forbid, there's like, in my own family, like somebody was sick. Everybody's there, okay? Like me, I'm one of 7, okay, children. Like somebody's struggling, I don't speak to my siblings so much. We're like that, we don't speak to each other so much. But if anybody's in trouble, you better believe we know that we have each other's back. Like we know that, and it's been proven over and over again. Of course, once, thank God, things get better, you don't talk as much, but you know that you are there again. So is this sustainable? Of course not. God willing, things will get better. God willing, anti-Semitism would lessen. And by the way, when you have the enemies at the door, sociologically, it's very natural that you feel closer to each other. It happens to every single group. We are not special in that way. So God willing, things will get better. But I do believe that there's been here like an awakening. In the same way that Jewish pride in reaction to the 6-day war in Israel kind of like reshaped a lot of American Judaism, this moment will reshape it with 2 caveats, or 2 comments with that. Number 1, it's not like gravity. Nothing is like gravity. America is not like gravity, and American Jews are not like gravity. By this I mean there aren't rules of physics in place that will determine the direction. It will depend on each and every one of us. There is no one person that has too little of a role that we are not the co-authors of this next chapter in our Jewish story. It depends on nobody else but us in this room and many other roles of people, you spoke about leadership yesterday, who are stepping up and saying, we are here, and we will write it, and it will be on us, and we will be remembered based on the actions that we take today. Now, because of this, my only difference with For's thinking about America, I think right now, since the 60s, let's say, we are in the hardest time for American Jews. There has never been a more challenging time for American Jews. But I think we are perhaps in the best time for American Judaism. In the time with the most possibility, with the most potential, the more people seeking engagement. And it will be up to each and every one of us to decide if and how we step up to write this next chapter of the American Jewish story.
Oof, I love that. Haviv, I want to get your take on that. As somebody who's living across the ocean, who, like you said, is waking up every day and saying, Lo ichpatli, I don't care what you think in America. If you're an anti-Zionist, I'm still sending my kids to school. I'm still living this reality. Do you think that that Mijal is thinking about this the same way that Israelis are?
I think, yeah, and I hear a lot of, I'm sorry, you're here as an American, but
I'm Argentinian also, so you know I can switch hats.
So the Argentinian is the sort of
Yeah, it's
almost
like,
Israeli
okay,
kind of.
you're good.
I hear a lot of my own sense of things in what Mijal is saying. I think that ultimately, first of all, I completely disagree with you on fighting anti-Semitism. I think that
Well, we should fight it or not fight
I
it?
think if you fight anti-Semitism, you're going to lose a lot of Jews because anti-Semitism is making a lot of Zionists nowadays. So I think we should be sending them flowers.
By the way, it was the only, in 1 week, Tom Friedman and Bret Stephens both wrote columns. These guys never agreed on anything. They both said the same thing. They're like,
Yeah.
thank you for creating the next generation of Jewish warriors.
Well, I should have read that before saying it. It sounded more original. Look, we are. Let me echo Mijal. This is, the worst of times and the best of times. For the worst of times, it's not that bad, and for the best of times, let's make of it. Let's make of it. You are an astonishing platform. I speak as the son of a former director of Jewish education at a JCC. People will come to the JCC who won't go to other places, and they will come for experiences they won't find elsewhere. And we have a problem, and that problem is that you American Jews, and I promise you also Israelis, but we're not talking about Israelis right now, have almost completely forgotten your story. And the reason you forgot your story is that America has been this shining beacon of integration and love and belonging for you that has felt absolutely and correctly like you had left Jewish history behind, and you were redeemed and you were saved and you were part. And that made you not need your history and not need your story anymore. And so for really good reasons, for the best imaginable reasons, for reasons so wonderful it sounds like the beginning of the Messianic age, you forgot it. And this happened 100 years ago. This didn't happen 20 years ago. And now that you suddenly face a sustained assault on the Jewish story, you don't have the Jewish story at your command. And so I think that your task now is very specific. It is to teach a lot of history to a lot of people very fast. I have had that experience on college campus, but my time is short. But I have more to say on it, but I'll stop. But I just want you to know that I think that there are detailed, specific, measurable, actionable ways in which you create a Jewish generation that comes out of this difficult moment and builds 2 more generations of strength. And you should go after those things.
I love that notion, that it's not only about anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, because you're right, that's not going to create this next generation of young people who love being Jewish, doing Jewish, being a part of our peoplehood, the Israel that's in our part. But it's hard. It's hard to teach a lot of people, a lot of history very quickly. Mijal, you're working with young people all the time. Do you think there's a recipe for how to do this right?
Yes, well, not only one, but there's many ways. Maybe I'll just share two things that I have seen. First of all, if we're talking specifically about history, don't be afraid of history, okay? Like we did like a series, for example, on just like history of Israel and Zionism. And I brought in a scholar who I knew well, and I knew we were gonna disagree on some stuff, and we modeled what that was like. And I modeled what it was like to say, I am a proud supporter of Israel, I'm a Zionist, and I'm not afraid of the past. And like there's no reason to be afraid of that. And too many people are like nervous right now because they see themselves, the young people, I don't want to generalize too much, my young people, okay? So my anecdotal evidence. My young people right now, many of them feel like they have been pushed to become fighters overnight. They are pushed at their workplaces, okay? It's huge, by the way, what's happening at work. At their workplaces and in social media, they suddenly have to defend. So they're very much in like fight or flight mode, right? What do I say? How do I prove? How do I show this? What about my sister who is in the encampment, right? Like it's very, very messy. So I actually think we need to create alternative spaces in which we're not afraid of history and we can go into like nuanced and complicated things. One more thing in terms of education right now for young people. If I were to say the most important thing right now is that we have to help, Haviv was saying what happened with the comfort of America. One of the things that happens with the comfort of America is that many, many Jews have been told that we get to be, the Jewish community is desperate to engage us, okay? That it's like, if only you just participated in Jewish life, we'd be so grateful to you, all right? This is not a great recipe for creating the next generation of Jews. You know what the right recipe or a great recipe is? Is to say, the Jewish people need you. And you're not a participant, you're a stakeholder. You're writing this. It actually depends on you. Like it will depend on you and what you end up doing. And I promise you that when people feel this way, when they're invited to actually experiment, to lead, to figure out how do I stand up right now, everything changes because it is not somebody else's thing anymore that they're just like lucky them that you're participating. They own it, and that feeling of ownership shapes somebody for an entire lifetime. So the more that we can do to invite people in and to see them and to treat them as leaders and as stakeholders, the more that we will be able to really shape this next generation.
I love that. I mean, it reminds me of the late, great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks and his interpretation of the moment of the Mishkan, right? Up until that point, we were given, and finally, when we were asked to participate, we finally step up, we stop fetching, complaining, whining all the time, and that was the moment of transition. Yeah. And you're saying the same thing, like, let's ask of our people to contribute. Our young people especially, do something, give us something, be a part of it.
Ask what you can do for your community.
Yes, the new JFK. Okay, we're gonna have to wrap up, unfortunately, so I'm gonna ask each of you to think about, I'm gonna start with you, Haviv, think about a message you wanna leave this incredible community with, something of hope, the future, something that you want them to take away as they go back to 86 different JCCs, to communities all over North America, all over the world. What's the message you want them to bring home with them?
I have a very specific axe to grind.
Here we go.
I'm going to tell you a 90-second version of a story that I have told before. If you heard a podcast or something, I apologize. I gave a talk at Harvard Law, and a kid came up to me afterwards, Harvard Law student, Jewish kid, and said to me, I can't cross the Harvard yard, you know, the place where the big encampment is on campus, without them yelling at me, Zionism is colonialism. So I said to him, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. So he said, no, that really hurts. It really hurts when that happens. So I was very Israeli in that conversation. So I said, all right, you know, buck up. Israelis your age are in a war. You can handle this. And then he says, no, what hurts is that I don't know the answer. And I really can't emphasize enough how Israeli I am in all the worst ways. And so what I said back, so I got really annoyed at him, and I said, you don't know the answer to Zionism is colonialism? You don't know that 90% of the Jews who became Israel had nowhere else to go because America and Canada and Britain and everyone else on earth passed quotas and wouldn't take them in? and that the DPs were still in Bergen-Belsen and Dachau and Buchenwald 3 years later, and Congress wouldn't let them in, and the British Parliament wouldn't let them in, and Australia wouldn't let them in, and South Africa wouldn't let them in, and the only time those camps start emptying out is when Israel is founded? You don't know that we're 90% refugees who had nowhere else to go? There's no such colonialism. There's another colonialism like that. You don't know that we have an ancient tradition of belonging to this place? Every synagogue on earth in 2,000 years is built facing Jerusalem. No French church was built facing Algeria when the French in 1830 started colonizing Algeria. There's no such colonialism. You don't know that we come from 60 different countries, we the Israelis, and not a single mother country that sent us, and we have nowhere to go back to? That's not colonialism. We might be the worst thing in the world, but we're not that particular kind of worst thing. We're a different kind of. You don't know that? And this kid takes a step back, and he has this embarrassed smile on his face. I think he's embarrassed for me, not for him. And he says, "Holy shit, I'm invincible." And he walks off. Wait. I didn't tell you all the conversations I did poorly at. But that moment, and about 40 conversations like it that I've had with college students over the last 11 months, that didn't go quite as perfectly, so I didn't use that as the model. But that moment changed my professional direction, and I think it should change all of our professional directions. When he knew, what did I tell him? I told him paragraph 5, 7, and 9 of the Wikipedia article on Jewish migration. I told him basic things, and he did not know. And he faces on his campus a war on his story, and he doesn't know his story. And so I submit to you that our great task at this moment in our history is to reclaim that story. When you do reclaim that story, you discover one thing. I think I'm over my last sentence thing. You discover an astonishing thing. You discover that we are the strongest Jews who have ever lived. You are the strongest Jews in your version of strength as citizens in this vast, great democracy. There's never been a community that could do what you can do. Even in America, there's no minority that can build a JCC system and a federation system and an APAC and the counter APAC that doesn't like APAC. And no other community can do this. You are the strongest diaspora community there's ever existed in the face of the earth by an order of magnitude. And we Israelis in our versions of strength are the strongest Jews who ever lived. If we sit and despair, first of all, we are just literally misreading what's happening. Secondly, we betray the generations of Jews, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, who sacrificed and worked and sweated to give us this strength. And so we face a slightly difficult moment. And we're the strongest Jews who ever lived. And the task is clear. And our only job is to get it done.
Excellent.
Yeah,
final word.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting so much Torah, by the way, in this panel, from like the Talmud to the blessings to Rabbi. So I'll end with Rabbi Sachs, actually. I was very privileged to get to know him and be a student in Lower Manhattan. And when COVID hit and everybody was struggling, I actually reached out to him and I asked him for advice. And I said, I was part of like a network of spiritual leaders, clergy. And I told Rabbi Sachs over email, I said, like, everyone's really struggling. Can you give us some words of comfort? He was sick back then. He sent back a 12-minute video for the group. And I'll share maybe 2 thoughts from there. The first one, he said, and I think it's important to name it in this room, with this great task that Haviv has placed before us, is that every Moses needs an Aaron. Okay? Rabbi Sachs reminded that and you can think about Moses when he had to hold up his hands and he had helpers from both sides holding him up, that the task is great, the possibilities are extraordinary, and we need our Aaron next to us. So that's actually something that is that I take very seriously, and that I think this space is absolutely critical and necessary to look around and to say, who are going to be my people, both in times of great joy and in times of great struggle that I'm going to be able to lean on. Because if we don't have that, Moses could not have kept leading them for 40 years, okay? But 40 years in the wilderness towards the promised land. And the second thing that Rabbi Sachs mentioned there, and he said so many times, is that hope is not just like a thing that happens. Hope is a choice. Hope is a choice. It's a commitment. It is a decision that if we have the right people with us, if we know our story, if we know the path ahead, then we can make things better. And it might take a long time, and it's not going to be easy, and there's so many different touch points, but hope is an absolute commitment to the idea that we can be part of the great project of making things better. So I hope that this gathering really imbues us with that sense of knowing who our people are and giving us a great bout of strength to have hope for the work ahead and continue to shape the lives of 1.5, I'm still amazed by that number, million American Jews and allies on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Mijal. Ladies and gentlemen, Mijal and Haviv. Let's show them how much we appreciate them. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
All right. You can do this too. And I don't just mean bring the two of them to your J or your camp. Talk to them. They may be willing to do so, but you can do this too. The Z3 idea is happening all over the country, all over the world. I'm looking at my friend Todd Rockoff, who's doing it in Tucson. You got Scott and Adrian and the team who's doing it in Orange County. You've got Daniel and Rachel doing it in Austin. You got coming up in Miami. There's a whole consortium. You got Alan Saddleoff. You got Scott Ehrlich. They're doing it there. Betsy's doing her version of it in San Diego. This is happening all over in different ways and different forms. If you want to bring this to your J, there's going to be breakout sessions now. You can learn how to bring it. But this is our moment. This is why we exist. And I'm hoping that all of you will take what you learned today very seriously and take it home with you. Thank you very much. We'll see you back here soon.